5 easy and fun ideas to help picky eaters via teletherapy or at home. My guest tonight is the wonderful Lauren Tandy. She's a speech language pathologist who specializes in not only feeding therapy, but teletherapy, which of course is a very hot topic right now. And Lauren, I always feel like I could just read a bio, but I'd rather you just kind of told everybody about yourself. Where are you located?
I am located in State Line, Idaho, just across the border from Washington. So I'm licensed in both Washington State and Idaho. And I service early intervention in Washington as well as Idaho. And I do school telepractice, combination telepractice and in-person service in Washington as well.
Wow. And how long have you been doing that?
Seems like a long time. So early intervention for the last 5 years via private practice under my name, school district intervention contracts for the last 3 to 4 years, and then telepractice for the last 3 years. And that popped up out of necessity for our rural school districts, and then out of necessity also for our rural early intervention practice.
That's fantastic. And I'm so excited about the courses that you're offering to everyone on your website. So I'm sure everybody will check that out. I'll put the link one more time for everyone here in the comments in just a moment. But I want to go ahead and get started because you and I chatted for a little bit last week, and I was so thrilled with all the creative ideas you were offering. I had asked you a question because now that I'm doing teletherapy, it takes me back to when I used to work in the hospital. And oftentimes the parents would be behind a one-way mirror, and they'd be watching me with the child in the clinic room, and then we would switch. And I would have a little microphone that I could talk into, and they could hear me a little bit, or they'd have headphones on. We just did a variety of things. But the whole idea was that I didn't want to distract the child, and I wanted the parent to be doing the therapy. And I was really just coaching. And this was 20 years ago, before the coaching model ever came about. So that really got me thinking about teletherapy and how even when I'm in a person's home, my goal as soon as possible is to be able to move to the other end of the table and have the parent be doing the therapy with the child. And I'm just way in the background, giving them a few tips every once in a while. And I'm usually videoing as well so that we can look at the video later. We might even just delete it, but we can watch it if we need to. And it actually reminds me of teletherapy. And the only difference is there's a screen between us. But other than that, I think we can use a lot of the same techniques. So the tip that I was asking you about, I really wanted to get your opinion about, is I've been doing this little trick where I have the parents take their phone and just go ahead. And if they've got wireless buds, that's great. But a lot of them don't. And I just have them put one in one ear, and then they tuck the phone in their pocket. And that way they're still kind of playing with the kids, but I'm talking on my phone to them, and I have my microphone muted on the teletherapy platform. So the kid can't hear me, but I'm like Cyrano de Bergerac in their ear. And I found it to be really helpful, but I thought you offered some great points as to when that can work and other times when it may not work. Would you mind just telling everybody a little bit about what we chatted about last week? And I thought there were really, really important points.
Yeah, so we actually reviewed that in our team meeting for early intervention last week when all of the team members were getting into and practicing teletherapy for their first time, and recording the sessions, reporting back what worked, what didn't work. And one thing that we noticed from a recorded session was that the child seemed to be distracted with the constant verbal feedback over the screen, and also from having the computer stood up on the kitchen table looking at them in the living room. So I think that one of them came up with the idea also, what if we were able to talk to the parent, like you said, and then I recommended to them, there's that option. And then there's the option of just giving them the space and giving them, setting up the expectation before the activity. So you have a planned activity, you talk to the parent, say, okay, what are we working on? What's the skill that we're going to be addressing? How are you going to work on that? Here's some strategies that might help you through. And then giving them the space to do it, and you observe as the clinician. And
Hmm.
then have the time afterwards so that you're not interrupting the natural environment. You take time afterwards to break down what went well, what they could have done differently, how they felt about it, if they needed information or tips from you. So there's those two options.
I think that's really great. And I think and I'm sure you would agree with me on this, so much of it depends on the parent's personality and
Mhm.
oftentimes the child's personality, but also the therapist's personality, because we all sort of have our own rhythm. And
Yeah.
I think what's a little bit challenging with so many of us really new to teletherapy is that we're trying to find our rhythm for sure. So both of those are great suggestions. I also wanted to ask you, well, I know in a few minutes we're going to be talking a little bit about games and reinforcers and how to incorporate those into what I always call them mouth games or food games.
Yeah.
So in other words, when I'm working with a child, just say on chewing or maybe learning better lip closure, and we aren't necessarily working on a meal, we're going to be getting to that in a few minutes. But I wanted to ask you specifically about mealtime and how do you keep these little kids engaged if they've got their meal in front of them and they can see you on the screen now? Aren't they kind of just staring at the screen and forgetting to actually take a bite? Any strategies around that?
Yeah, so this can work for kids just eating a meal and working on something in front of you, or it can work on kids. I have a lot of kids, and a lot of us speech language pathologists do, who are working on feeding and also working on speech and language skills.
Yeah.
So, what I like to do is book time while we're feeding or having our meal. So, I'll sit in front of the child on the computer or the phone propped up on the kitchen table, and we'll go through a book that's targeting our speech skills or just a book to keep him entertained and engaged and attentive to reading. We're working on our feeding and swallowing skills at the same time as sitting in one spot for a longer period of time, being engaged for a longer period of time, having longer attention span. And then he can also, in between taking swallows, tell me where's his feet. So there's lots of fun ways to keep them engaged. But I like the kiddos who are working on both skills where we can work on both things at the same time.
I love that too, because it's not so much about screen time and pulling up games per se. It really is about the two of us having a meal together. Do you ever just have a little bit of something that you're eating as well when the child's eating on the other side of the screen?
Oh, yes, I do. So I brought some cups in a recent, well, this past Thursday, actually, I had a session with a little girl learning to cup drink.
Uh-huh.
And you know how little kids do. They go like this,
Yeah.
all the way in the mouth, holding it
Right.
with the teeth. And so I had my own cup showing mom, okay, I want you to work on pulling it, helping her to pull it back. Don't let her mouth it and bite it. I want the lip positioning on the tip of the cup. And so I would show her like this. So then I explain, but then it gives the mom a visual so that she doesn't feel like she's all on her own trying to figure this out without me there to do it for her.
I like that because they're the ones in the room with the child, not us.
Right.
So one of the things I'm taking away from talking to you is that you really have to have your equipment around you so that you can grab whatever you need, because your desk or wherever your computer is really is your clinic room or your bag of tricks.
I got lots of stuff around me right now. I got bottles, I got chewy tubes, I got books. So depending on your client.
Right, right. And so you can just pull out of your countertop of tricks, not your bag of tricks anymore, whatever you happen to need. So being prepared and being ready is so important, because the last thing you want to do is say, "Oh, just a second," and run away off the screen to go grab something.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Well, you were doing such a good job explaining to me about you having the cup and the parent having the cup, and that they're the ones in the room, but you're able to model from on the other side of the screen. But I've often wondered, and I know you do a lot with breast and bottle feeding, and I did that too, especially when I worked in the NICU. But how in the world do you deal with a camera that isn't necessarily going to get that child's entire face? Like, how do you see that suck, swallow, breathe pattern? What are you relying on other than your camera to really give you information for breast and bottle feeding? Because that baby's kind of snuggled in mommy's arms and you're not going to get a full on view.
So some clinicians might be afraid of this, and I was as well, actually, because I thought to myself, how am I going to get the information that I need to make valid recommendations going forward? But I have tested this out in therapy, and I've asked the mom, okay, because when they're using a phone, I ask them to prop it up somewhere so that it's not, floating around and making me dizzy in the air. Or if they have a computer, I ask them to prop it up where I have the best viewing opportunity. However, if they're breastfeeding, you know how we need to get in there to see, okay, and listen and put the ear up and what's this child doing? Or we need to get down and see the contact between the lips and the bottle for the lip seal or the tongue clicking off. But what I did was I said, okay, mom, walk me through this, talk me through what you're seeing. So as she gave her baby the bottle, I asked her, what was that sound that I heard? And I knew what it was because I could still hear it well enough, but I wanted to know that she knew what it was
Mm-hmm.
on our previous therapy sessions and me training her. I wanted to see that she was generalizing this to her regular feeds with her baby. And it also helped me to know, okay, is she reporting back to me accurately? Is she understanding what these sounds mean? Um,
Right.
and it also depends on the clinician's skill and experience level.
Sure.
And you have to know that as a clinician, what you're comfortable with, what you have experience with, if you can tell the sound and what it means, to train the mother through that. But it's really helpful for a coaching model for the mother to be able to report what she's seeing.
I love that. Again, it gets back to so much of this is about coaching, which it should be anyway, because we're only there for half an hour to an hour a week anyway, sometimes twice a week when we were going into people's homes. But the reality is, it really is about the parent and child relationship around learning to love all sorts of food, whether it be breastfeeding or solids or wherever they are in the developmental process of feeding. So I love that. And actually, once I start going back into people's homes, when all of this settles down, I'm going to remember that because I think sometimes when I'm in the same room face to face, I tend to kind of put my detective hat on. And really what I need to do is put the hat on the parent and say, let's you and I be a detective. What are you sensing? What are you feeling? What do you hear? Have you heard that earlier this week? What usually happens after you hear that sound? And really get all of that information because it empowers the parent as well.
It does. And
Yeah.
we can give lots of information and the parents say, yeah, I understand. And we document that they understood, they said it, but we don't really know that they understood until they demonstrate to us that I hear what you're hearing and I decipher that as the same thing.
Well, kind of circling back to our earlier comment too, and something you brought up at the beginning of this discussion, could you just lightly touch on, because I know you have a whole course on this as well. What about the fact that this is screen time? There really is something very different about it, and you have such a beautiful way of explaining it. Can you explain that to everybody for me?
Well, especially for early intervention and me promoting the coaching practice, the coaching model to parents. I always like to include the parents in all of my therapy sessions, no matter what the age. And even when I worked with adults, I included the family members who were caretakers or assisted with that. So I am a proponent for including the support system, and they can really help with therapy in many ways. But in terms of screen time, I'm a parent. I have 3 kids. I limit my kids' screen times. I read all the recommendations. And we have an article on my blog at tandytherapy.com that addresses less screen time, more face time. And what that means is all screen time is not equal. all screen time is not the same. There's static screen time, and then there is interactive screen time, like you and I are doing right now. We're
Right.
responding to each other socially, we're teaching each other things, we're learning from each other, and we know as speech language pathologists that that's how kids learn. They
Right.
learn from joint attention and feedback based on their reaction, response, or behavior. And so I made a class to help clinicians address this concerns with current AAP guidelines and recommendations per age.
Good.
For young kids, the recommendation is no screen time for babies and young toddlers. So how I address this with the coaching model is there's no reason that a child needs to look at the screen while you are coaching the parent, right?
Say
The
that again. Say that again.
so
There is
there
no
is
reason.
no reason that the child should need to look at the screen when you are coaching the parent child duo. So you are talking to the parent, walking them through strategies, teaching them strategies, observing them practice these strategies with the kiddo, and then meeting back up with them to break down what went well and what needs improvement. So the child does not need to be looking at the screen for that. There are opportunities for the child to look at screen during therapy if that's appropriate, such as increased attention with book time during a meal or other opportunities. But if it's a concern of the parent and they're prioritizing other screen time during the day, there's no reason that a coaching model intervention session needs to include screen time for the child.
And so when you're working with older kids who are used to a little bit of screen time, know how to use a touch screen, and they've got games on their iPad and that kind of thing, um, do you how often do you incorporate those sorts of games versus real life games that you might have on the desk in front of you that are just as interactive? Do you balance those two, or kind of what's your philosophy around that?
So I would like to make a priority list to help parents prioritize, okay, how much time does my kid spend on which type of screen time?
Mhm.
And how do I need to prioritize this throughout their day? Because I also have kids at home doing school on my
Right.
tablets that I use for therapy. I'm having to lend them to my kids to do schoolwork. And a lot of us are in those situations. And I know that it's a valid concern because when my uh, resource coordinators or family resource people are calling the parents, that is one of their apprehensions to continuing with telepractice therapy is, well, my kids are getting schoolwork at home,
Right.
they're on the iPad all day long, and they want to watch TV at night. So I have written in my class that you need to help as a clinician, you need to help parents prioritize that screen time and help them set boundaries around, okay, what is static and what is interactive with social response and learning opportunities for screen time.
And so even if it's a game that you pop up on the screen or you do a screen share, it can still be very interactive and a chance to connect virtually.
Mhm.
Um, but do you have any suggestions around games that you might just have right there on your desk that you can also play with the child? Is there anything special you like to do? I imagine it depends on the age.
Yeah, so I use Platform as my telepractice platform, and I have for 3 years. And I have the package that includes some interactive games. I have a whiteboard that I use with kids. We draw food things. If it's a feeding therapy, we draw pictures of words that they're working on. I give them stickers for the correct productions. And it's very interactive. They get lots of feedback from me, verbally and visually, because I'm able to reward their productions or their good tasks with visual reinforcers.
Uh-huh.
And then after, say, they get 5 things right or 10 things right that you set, then they can access like a 1 minute game. So there's reinforcement there, but it's very limited in the static visual interaction.
And that little bit, that 1 minute of static screen time, actually, in my opinion, reinforces better quality face to face time.
Yeah.
Because they're motivated now and they really want to look at you and listen to you and have that reciprocity and then get a minute of a reward and then go back to that. So, I think it's really smart.
One of the biggest requests for a rewarding static screen time is music.
Yeah.
And in particular, Frozen songs. And so I find myself rewarding with a lot of Frozen movies. So with tunes from Frozen and Frozen 2. So that's a big reward for my kids.
That's great. I'm glad you mentioned that. I hadn't had a chance to tell you, but coming up here, I believe it's next week or the following week, I have the schedule on my Facebook page for everyone. I'll have Ryan Judd, who is a really well-known music therapist and, award-winning musician on Pandora. And he's going to be letting all of us know how to incorporate music into teletherapy. So I'm really happy to hear that you're doing that as well. That's so fun. I love music's a big part of my life. So I love that too. I was going to mention to everyone that I'm really lucky in that I have this little Adventures in Veggieland Facebook group, and we're doing 20 vegetables in 2020. And when I started doing this series of 20 veggies in 2020 in January, I was just going to kind of go through my Adventures in Veggieland book and just add new ideas, 3 videos a week. And then suddenly we all had the need for teletherapy. And I've had so many therapists, I think about 300 in the past 2 weeks, join because they want to watch the videos to figure out how to incorporate them into teletherapy. The reason I'm mentioning that is I think a lot of people, I recognize so many names that are here, are on my Adventures in Veggieland group. And if anyone is out there who's not, please, the group is right there on my Facebook page. Click on it and I'll open the door and you can come on in. We'd love to have you. But the real reason why I'm bringing it up is you also started a Facebook group, and it is unbelievable how many people have joined. Can you tell everybody about that?
Yeah, it was completely unexpected, but based on my experience with telepractice and early intervention combined, I knew, because I'm a part of all of the telepractice groups out there,
Yeah.
knew that there's a ton of information for school-aged kiddos and a ton of resources, but not that many for birth to 3 or early intervention. And my passion is early intervention. I feel like I have the biggest opportunity there as a therapist, and I love babies. But I also love the preschool age too. And it's just a magical time for me where kids are learning. And so I started a page called Early Intervention Telepractice. It joins the 2 things that I have special interest in. And I put it out there the Monday that my kids stayed home from school. And within a week, we were over 11,700 members.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That is just wild.
We're well over 12,000 now. I haven't looked at it recently. I've kind of taken a break for the weekend and decompressed with my family, but getting back into the week.
As you should, as you should. Well, I joined yesterday, and we will put the link for everyone in the comments, but tell everybody one more time. And then also, would you please tell everyone about the resources on your website? And while you're doing that, I'm going to scan through to see if anybody has questions. So take it away, Lauren, and I'll look for questions here.
Yeah, so on my website, it's called Tandy, T as in Thomas, ANDY, therapy.com. And I have free resources and downloads regarding requirements, recommendations, and just sample soap notes for clinicians, articles that are helpful in the current telepractice environment, articles about how to do coaching model with early intervention via telepractice, and then how to get up and running with early intervention telepractice. On the store site under Tandy Therapy Box online store, I have 3 telepractice classes so far that are mixed media, and then you get access to my closed group for further teaching. And then I have just added today offering interactive coaching practice and coaching with me for clinicians and groups of clinicians.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. So it could be one person that you're coaching, or perhaps a whole practice or a group that get together and want your expertise.
Right. And I also had amazing help from my friend Hannah Boeck. She's a marketing guru that's helped me put my shop up in just a matter of days. But she also has helped me put together some private practice forms. They are editable in Word and Canva, and we're also offering them to be offered in DocuSign. In our current state, we kind of have to get creative in how to connect with parents and how to still get our paperwork signed. So trying to
Right.
offer those resources as well.
I love DocuSign. I have a membership as well.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. You're just a wealth of information. I'm going to flip us back to side by side and just take a look. Now, if anybody has any questions for Lauren or for me about picky eating, but Lauren is an excellent feeding therapist as well. And I think this is your big opportunity to everybody listening to have Lauren answer your questions about teletherapy. So it takes about 30 seconds once you type the question for me to see it on my end. So I'm just going to keep scanning here for a minute, but put those in as soon as you can. And oh my gosh, we have people here from Indiana. We have Melissa from Florida and Michelle from Florida, Arizona, Alaska, Arkansas, the Carolinas, Mississippi,
Washington, hi.
Washington, yay. That's fantastic. Fantastic. Well, you guys, be sure you're putting your questions in, because we do have about another 15 minutes to chat with Lauren. If you guys do have questions, I hate to hang up too quickly, because then the questions come the moment I stop the video. So I'm going to give everybody a minute. And I have a question, actually. So I was curious, with so many parents having 2 or 3 kids at home right now, do you have any strategies for us around making sure that the parent and that one child that you're treating are the main focus? Because naturally, I would imagine you're going to have a few kids coming in and out of the room. You can't always be in your own room. But what are your thoughts around that?
I like to incorporate the other kids.
Do you?
So I know that every clinician has a different style. Every clinician has a different preference. My preference is to also get the little kids working for me. So I enlist them to do things that mommy or daddy is doing in therapy, things that are appropriate for their age and skill, but they can also be peer models for their brother or sister, especially in speech language, or the kids who have speech language goals. If their older brother or sister is talking over them or not giving them opportunities to talk, then I really try to focus on that duo and helping them to understand that they need to give room to their little baby brother or sister.
That's so great. I did that the other day. I have a family that has 3 kids at home, and I was working with the kindergartner, and I had the sister stacking paper cups for me. So every time we were working on chewing, so every time he did his chewing practice, she took 3 cups, or excuse me, she took 5 cups, and she'd stack, right? And then he would do his next exercise, and she would put 4 cups on top, until eventually, as we did our exercises, this big pyramid of cups now went in front of the whole screen, and you couldn't even see my face anymore, but you could hear my voice.
Yeah.
And then I said, okay, do it again. And he would do one more practice with his chewing. And then his sister gave him a squishy ball, and he got to throw it at the cups, but he also got, and it's really soft, squishy, no big deal. He also got to throw it at the screen, and it's not going to hurt it. And so I knew that was coming. And so the moment they all came crashing down, I'm on the other end going, which only made him want to do it. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. And his sister started stacking the cups again, and he got in more practice that way. Yeah. So I think a lot of the really simple toys that we tend to pull in from anybody's home, cups and things out of the kitchen, and wooden spoons and pots to make drums with, or with my older kids, cooking in the kitchen with them, with the parent helping them. Nothing wrong with bringing in the rest of the family. Occasionally, I'll have a child that does need a little bit more quiet environment to really focus, and I just try to plan accordingly. Do you run into that as well?
Yeah, so that made me think of a lot of different play situations that I've had recently with kiddos and feeding therapy. I love cooking with the family, so I'll have mom or dad set up the phone or the computer by where they have their cooking stuff lined out, and it gives the kid good sensory integration play. I will have I have all of my props here, but I will have the child, or mom will have the child, and I'll coach them through it using their regular toy items in the food to push it around and get dirty. And so there's lots of different things, like you said, using toys or just things in their environment that they can use as toys.
Right.
I mean, this can become a stick figure, and we can pretend like he's going around and then eating the food. So there's lots of different opportunities for being creative, as clinicians and parents for our feeding kiddos.
And one I recently shared on this Facebook page that everybody could just scroll down to see it. I think I shared it yesterday, or maybe it was this morning, is one that I have on my Adventures in Veggieland group as well in our video files. And that is, right now we all have tons of canned goods. And so when I used to go into people's homes, I would play this game all the time, but it's really easy to do during teletherapy. I'll just take my own canned goods out of my pantry and I'll stack them up into different patterns. And then I take pictures of them on my phone and I email them to mom or dad, and they print them off, or they just keep them on their phone so the kid can scroll through. Then after they do the task, they say, "Are you ready?" And they hold the phone up or the printed paper up to the screen. And I go, "Okay, go." And I've got to duplicate whatever they held up to the screen. And then we switch and they have to do the same thing. I hold up a picture of the cans from their house, and you can do, 3 or 4 cans in fun patterns. Or for my teenagers, I mean, we get really elaborate, like some major architectural structures that you have to duplicate exactly in order to win your turn. So there's all types of really fun things we can do that aren't necessarily screen time, that static screen time that you were talking about. Well, wouldn't you know it, now a million questions are coming our way.
All at once.
Oh my gosh, they are pouring in like a flood. It just went crazy. So let me go ahead and, I just love this question from Susan. Let me pop it up on the screen. Susan says, how do you incorporate self-regulation strategies before and throughout your sessions? I have a feeling you have good answers for that one. Go ahead, Lauren.
So through early intervention, it depends on the age of the child, but through early intervention, I've really learned, and it's hit home for me, that our kids to a certain age, they can't self-regulate. They need our help to regulate themselves. They are still learning how to regulate. And so it's co-regulation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have to read. I do a lot of sensory desensitization for kiddos who are overly sensory sensitized to certain things, such as textures or things in their mouth if they're a G-tube fed baby. So we work on meeting the kiddo where their need is and where their skill is and where their aversiveness is. And so I will train a parent through that. Prior to the therapy session or prior to the practice, I will talk parents through, okay, what does this look like? What does she do when she gets a little overstimulated? How do you respond to that typically? Does that work? And then I'll ask her to show me how they do it typically throughout the day on an everyday basis. And then after that, I'll give them that observation time where I'm quiet, not disturbing the feeding duo. And then we'll break it down afterwards and say, okay, what did you see?
Yeah.
How did that feel to you?
Yeah.
What ideas can we come up with? And then I'll help them with the ideas.
I think that really helps the parent learn to read their child's cues as well. And again, as I said earlier, very much feel empowered because they are empowered by helping their child and learning how to parent this child maybe a little bit differently than they originally anticipated, because every child's unique.
Right. And every relationship with a baby or a child is unique. And so we don't want to impose our beliefs or guidance on them. We want to help them in what their desire is.
I love that. I love the way you just said that. Madeline has a great question here. It is, are there common telepractice problems that you've encountered that you'd like to advise us about? Maybe one or two that pop into your head right away.
Absolutely. So the first thing that I kind of put out there for all telepractitioners to do and parents on their end is on the clinician's end, you need to have a computer that is directly connected into the wall or Ethernet cable for a hardwired internet connection. That's going to get rid of as much noise and distraction as possible. On the parents' side, you want to make sure to turn off all of your streaming devices. And actually, this goes for both sides. Turn off all streaming devices. Make sure that your family isn't watching TV in the other room.
Right.
Really create opportune bandwidth for a good connection.
That's so important because then you're not going to get those unexpected glitches. I mean, they're going to happen occasionally, and I think people really understand because, technology, right?
Yeah.
But being proactive like that is those are really simple things I think that all of us can do. So thank you for that. Allison wants to know, how often are your sessions? Similar frequency to in-person sessions? How do those work?
The exact same. So I do the same as what I would do in person. Our telepractice sessions are supposed to be like our in-person sessions in quality, frequency. The plan of care does not change. They still get what you would give them in person. It becomes a little bit more up to us because when we're traveling, we have filler time. If I'm going to a child's home, I have extra time to pack up my stuff or go wash my hands or take off my shoes that I don't have on telepractice. But that gives me the opportunity to, say, document at the end of a session and walk parents through, okay, what's our plan for next session? What do you want to work on this week? So it gives a little bit more opportunity for coaching and talking to the parent.
Rachel has a question that I think piggybacks onto that one quite well. I'd like to see how you structure a basic feeding session with a toddler being via teletherapy. And I think one of the things we have to clarify here, and Rachel, I know you're asking this too, is every single kid's session is different according to whatever skill or whether they're working on a motor skill or maybe just paying attention at the table or learning to sit in a high chair without fussing or eating a meal. So it can really vary. And one of the things we always want to remember, and I probably say this in every live presentation that I do, is that feeding is developmental. So chronological age is important, but developmental age is even more important in my professional opinion. So if I can just offer one tip, and then Lauren, if you don't mind offering whatever you'd like here, I do want to say that what I've noticed is that if I have a toddler who is working on meal time, it's still very important, even through teletherapy, that I mark the beginning of the meal and I mark the end of the meal. So if I'm in person, we'll mark the beginning of a meal with maybe a little song, or some families like to say a prayer, or even just light a little candle. Even a 2-year-old, you can help them light a candle. But we make it very clear that this meal times are a special time. And then we always mark the end of the meal to signal that we're done and there's no more eating for a couple hours. One of the first things I do for families is I put them on a hunger schedule as soon as I can. So we get rid of the grazing. So via teletherapy, I was doing this the other day, the child might blow out the candle and say all done, and then get down and leave the screen and go take their plate up to the counter, and now they can go do whatever they want to do. And mom and I or dad can have that time to sort of assess what just happened, what went well. And as you were saying, Lauren, I was a quiet observer, but now we can really kind of get into it and break it down and decide what they should work on that week. So I would say, Rachel, that the 2 tips I would give you is whether you're in the home with the child and you're working on a mealtime, or whether you're doing this via teletherapy, is to mark the beginning of the meal and mark the end of the meal. And I actually don't think that's a bad idea, even if you're just working on a skill like chewing on a chewy tube, to make it really clear to the kids that we're getting started now and now we're done. And I'm going to talk to mom and dad now. So I like to have the same routine. But Lauren, please tell me what you were thinking.
Yeah, I totally agree with the routine to give them those extra cues that we're starting and we're finishing so that they know. And I do that in speech therapy too, so that the child isn't overly stressed out with a long period of time. They know there's a beginning and there's an end, and they can count on that. So I think that's great information. And then I think that doing a feeding session with a toddler via teletherapy can go by the same structure as what I outlined in my 10 steps to early intervention via telepractice. That's an article resource on my website resource page. It's free. And then I also provide a sample soap note to go with that goes with the outline. And we start with in the previous session, we will have set up plans for what activity we were going to practice or what skill they were going to practice between the session, what we were going to target during our next session. And so when I come into a session, I say, okay, how did it go between sessions with what you were working on? Do you have what we were going to work on today ready to set up? Let's talk about it beforehand. They'll set it up. I'll observe the practice. We'll break it down afterwards. They might re-practice with the feedback. And then we will, talk about what went well, what we want to change, plan for between sessions, and then plan for our next session, what we're going to focus on skill-wise and within what activity. So that's the basic structure that I give for early intervention telepractice for any session. And I think that it works with feeding too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think what we're going to do is finish up with this one question from Amy. It's a little bit long. I'm going to pop it up here on the screen and read the whole thing to you. Amy also has a really good question. She says, any tips for introducing new foods via teletherapy? I have been having good success with carryover of what we've worked on in a session. I'm a little nervous how they will respond to something new when I'm looking through the screen. I assume I assume we're going to do lots of parent coaching. I just love to respond on the spot, and this seems a little tricky. And I can understand why she's hesitant about that. Lauren, do you have ideas around that?
Yeah, again, it depends completely on the child. Like you said, you're nervous about how they'll react, but you probably still have some inkling based on introducing other foods of how they might react. And it also depends on what's the location of when you have in the past offered these new foods. Have they come into the clinic? Do they do it at home? So that's a factor. It might actually go better if they're at home and they haven't been before, where they're more in the natural environment and maybe relaxed without someone in their home.
That's a good point. I am noticing that the kids right now, at least, it's a little bit novel. And I'm starting to feel like maybe I could just gently push the envelope a little bit more, because it is kind of exciting and fun. And they want to see what I'm about to do. I've been using puppets a lot on the screen as well. And, I'll be saying something and I'll just be kind of sneaky and have the puppet sort of appear, just randomly. And I'll kind of pretend like I have no idea that puppet's there. And I have found the puppet is actually very reinforcing, even more than my face. So, Amy, maybe that's an idea, is to have something that's a little bit of a surprise that will help that child be motivated to do the next step, like maybe licking a new food or smelling a new food or chewing or whatever you think that kiddo could do, that is totally unexpected, because that keeps anxiety down, and it's fun. It's just fun, and it's fun for you too. So, well, you know what, everybody, I wanted to just, first of all, I don't know that we've ever had this big of an audience. And I know it's because Lauren is so good at what she does. And I'm sure many of you have seen some of her webinars, and I'm very excited that she's giving away one of her courses to you. So she's going to let you choose which one, and we'll be picking that winner. Watch for a Facebook message from Lauren saying who won. But I also wanted to say, for any of you listening, these Monday Night with Coach Mel's, and I occasionally will do these on Thursdays as well, I will edit this down a little bit and I'll pop it onto my YouTube channel in the morning. So make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel. The icon for it is right on melaniepotock.com on my website. And make sure you're subscribed and set your YouTube settings to email inbox, and you'll get this video in your email the next day, and you can share it with your friends too. So just another way to learn more about this and watch it once again. I know I'm going to go back and watch this because Lauren, you had so many great tips. I'm kind of hoping you'll come back and do this again for us. I'm sure everybody else is too. And anything else that you want them to know about resources on your website before I sign off here?
Well, stay tuned. There's more coming. I am working on feeding and swallowing resources as well. There is research on my resource page and on my early intervention telepractice page regarding feeding and swallowing intervention via telepractice. So if you're curious, you can check out that.
That sounds great. I know everyone was so excited for this, Lauren. I can't thank you enough. And to everybody who tuned in tonight, we're thinking of you. Hang in there, everybody. We can get through this thanks to Lauren and her expertise. And I know everyone's going to go check out your website now. I know I'm going to go and see what I can sign up for. So thanks again. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. Lauren, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great week, everybody.